Now we'll go to share. Now, as I see that the live stream is going, and it is great. So nice when a plan comes together. So here we are at Chayei Sara, which of course means the life of Sarah. But there's nothing in it about the story of the matriarch, except that she dies in the very first line. Then we'll go on to read about the place that Abraham found to entomb her, negotiating to buy a cave and the land around it, the first real estate transaction chronicled in the Torah. Ukrainian-born Israeli artist Alex Levin paints this image of the tombs of the patriarchs, the massive structure built more than 2,000 years ago at the time of King Herod and still standing at Hebron, the Jerusalem hills filling the background. Over the centuries, the cave itself has been home to a Byzantine Christian basilica, a mosque, the sanctuary of Ibrahim, and a synagogue. And after the 1967 Three-Day War, Israel regained control over the region, and the structure above the cave was divided into sections for each, as it remains a pilgrimage site for Jews and Muslims and Christians, and sadly also the scene of sometimes deadly confrontations. The Torah tells us it is the tomb of Sarah and Abraham, Yitzhak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. Machpelah means double cave because
And Joseph.
and Joseph, you're right, who was brought there later, and more perhaps because according to Rashi, it has two chambers, an upper and a lower chamber. So Machpelah means double cave, and Midrash says it is the original entrance to the Garden of Eden, and according to Kabbalah, Adam and Eve are also buried there. Well, the cave starts us off. It's the story of the next matriarch, Rebecca, that seems to have inspired the most art. In this 1864 watercolor, British artist Frederick Goodall takes advantage of his several visits to Egypt, a popular destination for Victorian era artists. His time spent with Bedouin tribes led to a lifelike portrayal of Rebecca's welcome to Eliezer, the servant sent by Abraham to find a bride for Isaac. In fact, his quest for authenticity led Goodall to bring sheep and goats back from Egypt to England. Well, here he gives the characters a distinctively Middle Eastern look. Goodall also found himself caught up in the artistic tradition of Europeanizing biblical characters when he painted this version of Rebecca at the well about 15 years later. French artist Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot shows Rebecca in the moments just before I'm sorry, jumped ahead. Just before her first meeting with Eliezer, a demure, wistful, barefoot Rivka with a simple garland of leaves and buds in her hair, an earthenware jug beside her foreshadowing the kindness she will display for the weary traveler. And as I already gave it away, from Italy at about the same time, Milan artist Francesco Hayez suggests another display that might have caught Eliezer's eye. While the water jug is there and the palm trees on the horizon set the desert scene, Hayez, a leading figure in the Italian Romanticism style, gives the matriarch to be a classical, almost statue-like appearance. From 20th century Italy, here's a bit more playful depiction of the scene at the well by Ernani Constantini, in a career that took him from art school in his native Venice to serving with U.S. forces during World War II, and even a stint painting scenery for post-war Italian cinema. He also published several novels. While his works ranged from portraits to scenes of everyday life, Constantini kept returning to religious themes, and this painting is from a series he did of 12 women from the Bible. His Rebecca, something of a tease, modestly covering her face, but also showing a fair bit of leg. Also, there's that photobombing camel in the background, making it even more fun. On his ebullient and perhaps a shade irreverent take, Constantini said, "I wonder if there can be a dichotomy between religious-themed painting and profane-themed painting. I decide not and try to make a synthesis. I reaffirm myself in the concept that everything is sacred when there is sacredness in us, in the face of things in life. That's from Hernani Constantini. And closer to home, this is Rivka's Hospitality by KBS member and board member Courtney Meiselman, who lives in Kealakekua. A teacher, ceramics artist, and painter, she created this piece for her project to do an individual work for each parsha. Courtney writes, "Here we meet Rivka, and she greets us with refreshing water." I think Courtney's bright personality shines through, though, in details like the sweet-faced camel, and look at those eyelashes. But getting back to the beginning of the Parsha again, this colorful image for Chayei Sara is from American artist, attorney, and social activist Talia Werber from her Torah Portions series. As the sun is setting on Sarah's life, her family finds a way forward with the next matriarch, Rivka. The Queens, New York native has worked in state politics, written poems and plays, and serves as the Social Action Committee chair at the Reconstructionist West End Synagogue on Manhattan's Upper Side. That's Talia Werber, and that is art for this go-round of Chayei Sara.
Nice.
That's
Very,
very
very
interesting.
nice.
That's beautiful.
Excellent.
Really, really, really interesting. I want to
Lovely.
mention something about Talia Werber, that last artist, because I'm surprised you said in her bio that she now serves in a Reconstructionist congregation, because she became known in the Jewish world as one of two students at the Reconstructionist seminary who dropped out after October 7th because they felt that the Reconstructionist rabbinical school put them under a certain amount of pressure that politically was very sensitive, and she actually stopped her rabbinical training, took a break, and went back and finished her rabbinical training through the through the Reform training.
You're right. I did find that the last time I looked up her biography, and I should have updated this copy. You're right. That I did see that because I think for Lech Lecha, I also had one of her paintings in there, and I did find that information about the very public stance that she took.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting though, and I didn't know she was an artist as well. So that's I learned something today.
And I'm so glad. I wish Courtney, I know sometimes joins us. I wish she would fill us in on where she stands on that project, because she's been doing so many other things, I know. So,
yeah. But surely
Arnie,
you got her permission to use it.
Yes, yes. That's true. I gratefully reused with the permission of the artist. Arnie, you had something you wanted to?
Yeah, so just translation. I was always called a Vilta Chaya, so I always thought Chaya meant animal, and like a wild animal, right? So
yeah.
Is it the same word?
Yeah, an animal is a living thing.
Yeah.
So it is from the same root
It's
word.
just the way you use it.
Yeah.
The context.
Yeah.
I've been called that myself, Arnie.
Who hasn't?
All right, let's move on. Does anyone, while Ellen is getting the slide up, does anyone have a particular person they want to say out loud for a Misha Berach? I will start with Trina, who wrote to me that she's having surgery in by now less than 2 weeks, and asks us to remember to say before the surgery so she stays healthy, and after the surgery. So
when is this?
The
sometime
26th.
in the next 2 days, because she wrote to me a few days ago and she said in 2 weeks. So,
And what is
Her
her
surgery?
Hebrew?
Her surgery date is November 26th.
thank you.
What is her Hebrew name? Do you know?
Tova, I believe.
Tova Bas.
Can't help you.
Don't know. But I think that we can just say their names if we don't know their Hebrew names, because far be it from us to omit that just because we don't know their names, right? So
of course.
Yeah.
This is Heather. I just want to give an update. My aunt's breast biopsy came out benign. I found out the other day, Thursday, I found out. So thank you all for all the prayers.
Thank you very much
Okay.
for
Good.
letting us know. I was wondering about that.
Thanks.
All right, and yeah, just call out and say the names of people for Misha Berach, and then we'll.
Jan Ray.
Shalom Benim Ben Tzvi, my brother who had to go back into intensive care after that operation. So
Oh, okay. So still on our list. Tell us more about it later. Oh,
What
Okay,
is his name?
Shalom Benim Ben Tzvi.
My sister again, maybe I'm going to make it better by using her Hebrew name. I never. Taya Fagel Bat Yaakov. Anybody else?
Yeah, Jan Ray.
okay. Sarah, Bat Sarah.
Hmm,
Nachon? Yes.
yes.
And
And how
let's-
is your neck, Aviva?
it's better.
We'll say
Better.
we'll say a refuah for you also for complete healing of your neck.
Okay, I'll take it. And then still in our community, we have Stuart. I think Mike. We should not leave him off because we don't know.
Oh yeah, Mike. Yeah, right.
And Raz,
And
And Roz.
Yeah, me too. I have my finger or wrist are in a splint on my right hand, so I'll take a healing for that.
Marilyn.
and Sherry and Alice, both.
I
Really?
guess I'll take one too for the procedure I had yesterday.
Okay. Now
Thank
you
you.
know your Hebrew name, so we can ask you.
Sure, it's Yitzchak Ben Tzvi.
I love
I'm
this.
Miriam.
Everybody will take one. I'll take one. I'll take.
Yeah, we can all use it.
Yeah.
I always have to add for the families who are continuing their return to health process and from whatever crazy situation they were in that were not able to attend to their health and now have the freedom to attend to their health. So Misha Berach to them.
Amen.
Yeah, in general, it keeps coming back to me because I think it's short shrift of the common people of Sudan who are, again, seem to be going through hell. So
Yes.
P-doke, I even warmed up this week.
All right.
Misha Tenu, Makor HaBracha, Substrate, the ones before. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Misha Berach Iteinu Makor HaBracha Iteinu. Bless those in healing with Shlema, the renewal body, the renewal of spirits, and let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Baruch atah
Adonai,
Eloheinu melech haolam,
asher kitshanu
Kitshanu
Mitzvotzav,
v'mitzvotav
V'tzivanu,
v'tzivanu v'divrei Torah.
that we're gonna do all these lines 1 through 20. So, Vic, are you there? And did you have your coffee?
Yep.
All right.
And Sarah's life was 127 years, the years of Sarah's life. And Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came born Sarah and to Keen for her. And Abraham rose from before the dead, and he spoke to the Hittites, saying, I am a sojourning settler with you. Grant me a burial holding with you, and let me bury my dead now before me. And the Hittites answered Abraham, saying to him, Pray hear us, my Lord. You are a prince of God among us. In the pick of our graves, bury your dead. No man among us will deny you his grave for burying your dead. And Abraham rose and bowed to the folk of the land, to the Hittites. And he spoke with them, saying, If you have it in your hearts that I should bury my dead now before me, hear me and treat for me, Ephron. And the Hittites answered Abraham, saying, and let him grant me the cave of Machpelah that belongs to him, which is at the far end of his field, at the full price. Let him grant it to me in your midst as a burial holding. And Ephron was sitting in the midst of the Hittites, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of Hittites. All the assembled in the gates of this town, saying, Pray, my Lord, hear me. The field I grant you, and the cave that is in it, I grant it to you in full blood of my kinfolk. I grant it to you, bury your dead. And Abraham bowed before the folk of the land. And he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the folk of the land, saying, If you would hear me, I give the price of the field. Take it from me and let me bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, Pray, my Lord, hear me. Land for 400 silver shekels between me and you. What does it come to? Go bury your dead. And Abraham heeded Ephron, and Abraham weighed out to Ephron the silver that he spoke of in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 silver shekels at the merchant's tried weight. And Ephron's field at Machpelah by Mamre, the field and the cave that was in it, and every tree in the field within its boundaries all around. That's over to Abraham as a possession in the full view of the Hittites, all the assembled in the gate of his town. And then Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of Machpelah, field by Mamre, which is Hebron in the land of Canaan. And the field and the cave that was within it passed over to Abraham as a burial holding from the Hittites.
There's so many words in here that just the words make for a great study. But I want to go back to the very beginning, and just as an example, in the English, it doesn't translate well when it just says that Sarah lived to be 127 years old. Because in the Hebrew, it says her life was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. Those were the years of Sarah's life. Thank you, Alan. Now, it's very specific. It's like saying in various places in the Torah where the lineage of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, when the literature says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob versus to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And that's a big difference, and that somehow it's really missing in the Hebrew. So what does it mean to give someone 100 years and 20 years and 7 years? What are we actually saying when we say that about a person? Yes, Yehuda?
To me, it says that she lived a very full life. And the full life is thereby defined as something that's extended.
So she lived many lifetimes? Is that a fair thing to say?
A full life, not many lifetimes, a full life.
Okay.
You know, some people live a life that's very abbreviated, no matter how many years they attain. This particular life was a life that extended tremendously because her life was so full.
It could be her life was in sections. You know, in the first section, 100, and that was up with Abraham, and then the last section would have been with Isaac. And there's a backstory in there, okay, of relating to what we did last week, where Abraham and Isaac were at the stone, and the angel came down and stopped it, and then the two guys came down the mountain at the same time, but on different routes. And Abraham got there earlier, and she thought he came down alone, and she thought that Isaac was dead. So she killed herself. I don't remember where I got that thing, but that would have been the last 7 years.
Arnie, you had your hand up. I'm sorry I didn't call on you.
No, Vic had the same insight I did. That's exactly what I was going to say, Vic.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing too, and then I was trying to figure it out because she was 100 years old and laughing. That was like pre-motherhood. You're a different person after you're a mother, right? I mean, you change. But then the timing didn't quite work, but symbolically, because how old was Isaac? So he was more than 27 when she died. I don't know. Yeah. So
Could have been
the time
more than 7 years. No, 27 years.
The timing was fun. Didn't we last week we said if he somehow he'd have to have been 36 based on, but I don't know. Now I'm getting into the details because I was also just thinking, well, it's like teaching arithmetic. You're at 3 decimal points now. You separate. That's common in ancient addition, right? I mean, you separate the hundreds from the tens from the singles. So it's
No,
also
the other
no?
ages that are recorded in the Torah are not recorded like this.
Okay. That's why I said, but that's what I thought.
That's why Aviva brought it up, because this is a unique way of recording how old she was.
I'm gonna, before I call on Alan, Reba wrote in the chat, I heard one explanation that she experienced different stages of life. And Alan.
Well, 2 things. One is I was just looking at the comments in the Alter translation, and he notes that a similar he calls it a stylistic emphasis of how the age is written is used in the obituary notices of Abraham and Ishmael. So we'll have to see that because that's going to come up toward the end of the Parsha as well. So. But the thing that I wanted to point out, and again, it's one of those factors that we keep noticing things that we didn't notice the last time, and we talked a lot about what the Akedah experience did to the relationship in this family, and I thought that line 3 of what Vic just read, where it says Abraham came to mourn Sarah. And it indicates to me that they were separated, that they were not living together, or that she was in a separate place from him at the time of her death. And the fact that he had to come there to mourn for her and to arrange for the burial. And
the Hebrew is yakam, which means rose up or got up.
No, it says vayavo Avraham. Vayavo Avraham.
What line?
Line 3.
Line 2, not 3. Okay.
Okay, line 2. Let's see.
Yeah.
Abraham came. Yes, you're right. I'm sorry. Line 2.
Right. And so leave that slide up. So there are 2 very important, because so many words here are very important. First of all, in line 2, Abraham came to mourn, but really lispod is a very specific root word, and that is to eulogize.
Well, maybe he just came to her grave.
Right, but to eulogize, I just want to point out something about eulogizing. So we just said, in any way we look at it, we cannot just look at Sarah and think one thing of her. We We hated Sarah. We were disturbed by her behavior. We like there's so much just in the last chapter or the last two chapters, the whole Hagar story twice, right? She did not show qualities for which we would like to remember her as a matriarch. I will just say that personally. When I read it, I'm troubled. Yet, a eulogy, and I assume any eulogy, but a Jewish eulogy always is positive, but it's not too much. It's not like over exaggerating, but you never in a eulogy say something negative. That is not what a eulogy is about. So by him coming to mourn, it says mourn, even in my two translations that I have right here, but it is to eulogize. So he is there to speak of her good qualities. And after that, the next word in the next line 3, now it says Vayakam Avraham, and Abraham got up. That is a term that's used for the end of Shiv'ah. When you finish the 7 days of mourning, you get up from the Shiv'ah, and that's that word, Vayakam. So very, very important, like in the way that Jewish tradition draws back to the sources, these are really significant three, just right. In the first 3 lines, there's 3 really important words that mean something very specific.
What
not
about the
general.
small chet? I mean,
Yeah, the
that's a
small kaf.
strangey.
The small kaf,
Kaf, I
velivkotam.
mean.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to find a. I don't know majuscules and minuscules enough to spout them off. I have to look them up each time. They flummox me.
Part of the backstory was that Abraham and Sarah never talked again after that, and Isaac never talked to Abraham, and the whole family split apart.
Well, let's just say there is no mention in our written story that they ever talked again. But looking at the Torah as a narrative of an exact thing happening is very like troubling. It's rather that the specific parts of the story that are there, once they're told, they're never untold. They become part of the fabric of the culture. That's, we can read between the lines, and there's a whole study of Torah that says reading only between the lines, right? Reading the white spaces.
Mhm.
So we do not read anywhere that they ever talked again. And so coming from the place where we come from, when we think of trauma, it fits into that narrative. But we don't know, because as we get to the end of the parasha, there'll be some very clear clues that though we never heard of family members speaking to each other, the way the story is told toward the end, specifically at the burial of Abraham, that how would one brother have known clearly the brothers were in touch, even though we don't have any written documentation of that. So that, all good. We're meant to discuss this. That's the point. But
I'm assuming she went to live with Ishmael, her eldest son, because of the whole scene with Isaac and Abraham, and it just makes sense if you put it in what we think modern today's women would have done with and how they would have reacted and related to their kids.
Ruth Ellen?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I just so love to have these native Hebrew speakers. But it also points out again why I could never take the Bible literally. You have to read between the lines because it's so sparse. You don't realize till you read over how sparse it is because we've inculcated all these stories we were told. But even what you said, the whole idea that the words are the words they would use after a shiva, none of this was codified yet. So it says to me, obviously later rabbis, the people who amassed and accumulated this into a written text really took a lot of editorial, and they jumped across time to make it fit with what they were doing later, which is why we come back year after year in puzzlement. But I think we should not forget that, and that's the problem with the groups of any from the Judeo-Christian that taking the few words that are there literally, and even then among those people they're reading different translations. That's why it's hard to understand people who think, I think maybe more they're not thinking, so literally and without any room for moving to the right or the left, you know.
Oh, now that you said moving to the right or the left, we have to call on Alan.
Okay. As he wavers all over the road. Now, I think in terms of that, about not taking it or taking it literally, I think this is one of the rare examples of something very specific. There's something tangible. The cave exists, and it exists where the Torah says it is. And I think that's unique in a lot of the stories because we don't have that physical evidence of part of this part of the history actually taking place in many of the cases. And in this, we do have that. And I thought it was very telling looking at the history of the cave and how it was preserved, that even 2,000 years ago, there was a sense that this was the location and it was worth protecting. And that's why Herod built that big edifice over it. And the stories that I found in researching it were that I think at one point I think it was the 1920s, there was the daughter, the child of one of the archaeologists searching there was able to fit into the passageway through and took a camera and took pictures. So there are graves in there. There are remains that were placed in in this tomb. And it's just something that we don't have for much of the Torah, tangible evidence that something that's in there historically happened.
Right.
I want to bring up one more thing. I mean, Alan, did you wonder how long I was going to be into Torah study? Then we're going to mention that this was the parasha that in 2019, you and Nella celebrated your 50th anniversary, and this was the parasha, and all you and Nella and Rachel read from the Torah. And so for me, it was almost like the beginning of really studying Torah, because I wasn't going to come to this unprepared, not like completely rummaging through the parasha to find meaning and to tie the meaning to that day. So in the last two parashot leading up to here, we already have 3 life cycle events, at least, right? Judaism is often defined in some ways by life cycle events. That's something, that defines part of what Judaism is. So we have in the last parasha, the Brit Milah. We have death, burial, mourning, and we'll have progeny. But this sort of marks the beginning of me understanding that the Torah is to be studied, right? Because it's like, oh, I read it one week, and 3 days later, I sit down to read it again. I'm like, oh, I see this that I didn't see last time, and then 3 days later, oh, I see this that I didn't see last time. So for me, that's like the roadmap for what it means to study Torah. So this all goes back to that parasha. And we'll bring this back again at the end, because what it means to have family and community stay together is part of a very strong thread of this parasha. So even if we talk about trauma, we talk about the trauma of the Akedah, and that perhaps it led to the death of Sarah. Perhaps Isaac was so damaged that he couldn't move on with his life and needed help even to just, move on to the next stage, which was to pair off and create a family, and all the various things. But there is an order, and that order is how this parasha is laid out. So here we have so far, we're talking, and the mystery of why it's called Chayei Sara actually talks about her death. As a native Hebrew speaker, there's nothing mysterious about it. Parashot are often named for the first few words of the parasha.
Mm-hmm.
We can make a whole study of it, but it could also be that simple, right? It's just the story, right? And then, so we have that thread, and then we'll carry it to the end. But I just wanted to say that the Hebrew here is really important because it actually uses words that come specifically from life cycle events. And it's part of the story. And as I said earlier, that what is written, the Torah, the written part of the Torah is very specific. It's not a chronological narrative, because if it is, it's a pretty bad one, editorially. So it's clearly not the only point of writing it down.
I think we should talk about the whole nature of the negotiation of buying the gravesite, which is it's been expounded upon and written upon for many, many years. And it's the whole nature of what actually transpires when the conversation, the back and forth, where I'm going to give this to you for free. No, I don't want it. I want to pay for it. I want to pay for it. And then when he does pay for it, he pays, I think I've figured out with a calculator, 25 times the actual value of the land just to get it behind him that he owns it.
And not only does he say, I want to pay for it, he says, I want to pay full price for it.
Full price.
And then Ephron comes back and sort of drops the price in subtly, saying, what's 200 shekels between us? Like that's what the price is. It's not like it was listed, like it was the multiple listing service. I mean, this is Arnie, this is your territory. What do you make of that negotiation?
Well, I just want to know how Woody figured it was full price.
Oh, I actually did a search for how much land was worth then. And they said that this amount of land was probably worth about 17 shekels. And yet it was charged at 400.
Wow, that's interesting. What's your source? Did they have MLS back then with
AI.
comparable market analysis or what?
AI has penetrated Torah study. What can I say?
Looks like Ruth Allen has something to add to that.
Well, yeah, I was thinking how, Alan had mentioned earlier, it's our first real estate transaction, and then multiple things. First of all, so let's ask Arnie, like trying to figure out, what a real estate contract says. And they repeat it. And then in the Torah, when you repeat something to the point that it was supposed to, I think for generations thereafter, there was never supposed to be any question that Abraham particularly stole this land, that he wasn't entitled to it, And they said, and we told the Hittites, and it says basically the same thing 4 times in a row, right? Varying the language just a little bit. So make no mistake.
So I also want to say this parasha is extremely troubling reading it reading it today, because here you see some very, very clear words that could make it seem like there's a justification in only the Israelites owning, and specifically I'm using the term owning, the land, and by the mention of who the negotiations were with, it's clear that because we know the end of the story. Hold on, let me finish my thought. We know the end game, the end of the story, and who, what it looks like today. And by the way, in the English, in the American newspapers, you're not really reading what's really going on in that very part of Israel right now, which is very much more troubling even than what people are reading all the time, which is Gaza, Gaza, Gaza. These parashot and this particular real estate deal is seen as part of the justification. However, I wanted to introduce this concept. What if we look at it in the light of that God promised different things to Abraham? He promised him progeny and he promised him land. But in the end, who has to deliver on that promise and do the work? It's still back to Abraham, because we'll learn later that he actually did bring more nations into the world, and the purchase of land was his way of saying, well, God promised me this, but I don't think I'm supposed to sit around waiting. I think I'm supposed to take action, even if it's expensive. And so the first purchase of land, the promise came from God, but the action came from Abraham. So I wanted to throw that in there just because we're reading it today. And then go ahead, Yehuda.
I think it is a model for when in the Yishuv they decide to settle Israel again at the beginning of the 20th century. Then they immediately buy land in the Hula Valley. They don't take it over in any fashion. They spend money and buy land. And that's the initial, resettlement is a purchase.
Ruth Ellen?
Yeah, this is reminding me back, I have to fight about that webinar I saw, and they hadn't put it online. Now they had this woman wrote about the history of a massacre in Hebron in 1929. That was the beginning of the start. And the whole point is that Hebron, first, yes, it's the burial place. It's the patriarchy of Islam and Judaism, and how the Sabras and the Zionists and native Jewish people who were in that area all along had lived for a couple hundred years, very comfortably with their Arab neighbors, and how it all just got blown up. So it again, that's resonates with me as you're talking about in this time, about
You
trying
might
to
include the
make
Christians as well. Abraham is also the patriarch of the Christians.
Yes, yeah. Yes, I know, but the thing is, the Catholic Church and all that, I don't think they make a shrine to it the same way that the pilgrimage, I don't think it's as important, because
Well, within
Jesus
the history
wasn't
of
there, but
Hebron, though, there was actually a church built over the site as well that the Muslims took over and converted into a mosque. So it is
okay.
this
Well,
is
yeah,
the
okay,
tomb
yeah,
of the
that,
three religions of the book.
right. Well, in reference to how it's affected what's going on now in terms of who should control it and all that, not that the Christians weren't there, it was just that the Jews and the Muslims were
Who does control it right now?
more. Well, I mean, it's part of Israel, right? Since the wasn't
Yeah,
it taken back in
but
the
Israel
6 Day
doesn't
War?
have control over the mosque, for example. So like in Hebron, it was mostly Muslim. So I guess I'm saying where the cave is that Jewish or do
It's
Muslims?
in the West Bank.
Oh, it's in the West Bank.
It's in the West Bank. It has
Okay.
been, right. There have been agreements of access,
Patriarchs are buried.
right? There always been agreements.
Of
But
access,
who's
but
really in
it's-
control and who's really calling the shots and what it really looks like right now in that
Yeah.
area is extremist, nationalist, religious. And I
Jews.
started with extremist because
Jews?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In other words, who can more boldly actually go there without fearing for their lives and who
Yeah.
going there because they're fearing for their lives? That's what it actually looks like today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Arnie.
I was just going to say that it's really saddens me to see how the settlers in the West Bank are acting right now, and definitely not following the Torah in offering to purchase, but rather burn, pillage, plunder, kill, and everything else. To me, it's just totally opposite of what the Torah is supposed to teach us. So I just want to express my feelings about that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people agree with you.
And actually, Heather, if you're there, I would love to hear your take on the idea of separating an area for burial, because it's very clear that the request for a piece of land was not for a piece of land in the center of the city. It was on the outskirts, somewhere where it wouldn't interfere with life, or somewhere where it may not be controversial, but also have access. Because if we don't have access to our ancestors, we break a line of connectivity. So I just, as the keeper of our, the mashgicha for the cemetery, if you have anything you want to add.
Not really. I mean, I was just researching the Makitza when we were trying to get it, and it just says that we need to have some kind of boundary that separates us. It didn't specify what kind of boundary, so that's all I know.
And it doesn't necessarily, I don't think this parasha sheds light specifically on that, and not in terms of, in the way that I've been reading it, but the idea is not that it's a land capture, right? It is not, he's not asking for a land capture, even though there is that school of thought that it has something to do with the promise of the land. And Abraham says, well, clearly I can't just wait around for God to do it. It's time to start right now. So anyhow, pipe in if you have anything to add to that, but I'm going to call on Matan.
Hi. Um, I'm just going to try to put forward, and it's not my point of view, but it's the dog's making some noise. It's the point of view of a lot of the settlers. They feel like they're doing what the Torah calls them to do. They're destroying Amalek, which is what the Torah called the children of Israel to do, and they're taking over the land that was promised to them. Isn't that right, Aviva?
Yeah, that's the troubling part, because if you look at history as it's unfolding in front of our very eyes, there's definitely a case to be made that you can pick and choose the simple reading to suit your pre-existing agenda. And it's hard to say that about, these words really do exist, and they are really hard to read, except that in every other way we read Torah, we're instructed to read between the lines. And it's not about the goods of owning, of having, of pillaging, of throwing others out. The lines about Amalek are very troubling, but it is not commanded to kill people. That's what God does. That's the part that is very, very hard. It's easy to say, well, see, it says it right there. I can point to it and make it real. But there's a very important sentence, and I will find it. It's in line 4, and it says, I am a foreigner living for a time among you.
Right.
Ger v'toshav anochi. Those words are for always. They're not there and gone. Like I said, everything that is written is there for always. How many times are we going to see ger v'toshav in the Torah?
A lot, yeah.
Right. The minimum is 38. There's a theory that says that many more. That is really important. And it doesn't say ger v'toshav, I'm here today as a stranger, but one day I won't be. It's an always situation. And if Jews forget that about their history, what is there? Like, what are we?
There's no chance.
Right. It's a once and done. We can put the book away because we figured it out. But that's not what we're asked to do. Each one of us, the greatest mitzvah of all is to write a Torah of your own, or to write a letter in the scroll, as Rabbi Sachs says it. See yourself in the story. So if it's a once and done and we're like, oh, we figured it out, clearly this was meant for us, so everybody else should be thrown away by whatever means. That seems to me a clear violation of what we are instructed to do. To me. Arnie?
Yeah, if we look at the history of the creation of the Jewish state of Israel and the beginning of the Zionist movement, we see that Herzl and these guys made a big attempt to purchase land. And when it was finally recognized by the Arabs as, oops, these guys are taking over, there was a horrible, killing of Jewish settlers, and they were very much against that idea. And so thus begins the whole cycle of violence, this never-ending horrible wars that go on one after another over the land, because it's an unresolvable problem.
Right.
Even if you offer to buy it, doesn't mean someone's going to be willing to sell it. And the trouble with human nature is everybody thinks they're right, and therefore they're not willing to compromise and work things out. It's the greatest sadness.
And before that, Jews lived with Arabs in other countries, Iraq, Iran, all those countries, quite peaceably.
But always as a minority.
Yeah, of course, but that's even makes it more, because they were a minority and able to live quite peaceably in those countries, that even makes it more amazing, I guess is the word. That, they could have easily been pushed out, but it was really the Zionist movement that changed all that. then they got pushed out, and that's why they moved to Israel from Iran, Iraq, Turkey, all those countries.
Sometimes they lived peaceably and sometimes they didn't.
Yeah, I mean,
My-
throughout history, that's completely true. But I'm just saying, like, right before Zionism happened, things were pretty good among the Jews and Arabs in those countries. Right before then Zionism happened, and as soon as the Arabs started feeling that the Palestinians were being pushed out of Israel, out of Palestine, that's when they started attacking Jews, and it became dangerous for Jews in those countries. Throughout history, you're absolutely correct. There have been clashes, but just before Zionism, things were pretty peaceful, according to what I have read and understand. Just from my own investigation.
I'm gonna call on Ruth Ellen and then Arnie.
Been chomping at the bit. Yeah, because to when Aviva started, and then I said to Arnie, what the issue here is modern real estate is doing the title search. I mean, this is the thing. The periods we're talking about, we're leaving out in modernity the fact that it was taken over, it was the Ottoman Empire, and then the British took it over. That was when it was relatively calm. Just the same way Yugoslavia was relatively calm while they were under the Soviet influence, and when that fell apart, then they had the internal ethnic wars. It doesn't just happen with the Jews and the Arabs, but that goes all the way back to the Torah. So, like, who has the right to sell something? That's what it gets back to. And I've said over and over, who's right, who's wrong in a war, throw a dart at the map and say who has the rightful claim to this, and you're leaving out the fourth dimension, which is time. So what do you go back to? You could, say, well, 100 years ago, the Ottomans controlled it, so the Muslims have the right, but they stole it from the two, and and then Alexander the Great did this, and all these warriors and the British Empire, that's why I've been very attracted lately to the notion in the indigenous Americans that the idea of private property is frustrating. You don't have to have the idea of private property for people to understand that while we're living on this earth, we have to control a certain amount of space that we live in, and we need it for economic progress. But that doesn't mean that one family is entitled. I mean, we can go back and look the land grants that Lincoln did because we had all this land, but it wasn't our land, and they squeezed it out from the indigenous people. And now, the people who, with their guns, the government's not going to tell me what to do out in the Wild West, their family came out there. Granted, they were entitled to something because they worked hard and they took a risk and they went out and they were the pioneers. We stake our claim here, and now for thousands of years, they have the right to control everything. So anyway, it's all part and parcel of the whole way that human beings look at the physical world, and and at a time of death, especially, we have to see this. And the other one thing I was going to say, to your point about Abraham, Sarah died right then. God told him at other times, these people are an abomination to me, and later on, you're with my hand protecting you, you are going to commit war. But right here it says they were a righteous people, or relatively righteous, and saw that Abraham was a God, had a special relationship with his God. That's why they were going to give it to him. So these people did nothing to hit the Hittite, the people that controlled the land then. They didn't have any. There was no reason to steal it from them, and to keep the peace to get what they wanted. So it could all fit in.
So at a time in history when civilization moved from nomadic to agricultural, land developed its own value. But listen to what Abraham actually says. Let me go to a better translation. It says, I am a foreigner living for a time among you. Sell me a gravesite among you that I may bury my dead here. A little piece. And what is he saying? So I can move on. because in Jewish tradition, until the burial happens, you're in a state of a liminal space, a ninut. There is a need to bury the dead. He's not saying, I need this for my future progeny that God has promised me. There's nothing there mentioned, absolutely nothing. Give me a place to bury my dead so I can move on.
What if it's a hidden agenda? It doesn't say that either.
Right. And so it doesn't say that. We can read what we want into it. That's what we get to do, because all we're instructed is to study. We're not instructed to think of a specific thing. That's a very dangerous thing in Judaism. So I'm just looking at that. That's actually what it says, because it says, "Ve'ekbera tnu li achuzat kever imachem ve'ekbera." So I can move on personally, because he's stuck in many ways. He also can't move on because his son has not moved on. That's what we're going to read next. But I just want to, these are really important nuances that I think are worth looking at, especially in today's climate.
I was just going to say, talk about divine inspiration and God's hand in the creation of Eretz Israel is the story of Chaim Weizmann, and how he came up with this formula to improve, gunpowder, which enamored him to the British higher ups, all the military guys and the lords and everything else. He had an in, right? And he was able, because of that, to influence them to do the home mandate and get the whole state of Israel really created just because of that, it's really, he has an amazing story, and he was such a great leader, even though he created these weapons of war. He also strove for peace. And you see that with a lot of the Israeli leaders who are the greatest generals, become, like Yitzhak Rabin, and who I'm named after, not really, but we have the same name, turn to that because they have this great realization of the horrors of war.
And that is the,
I think it's really important to realize that Abraham went to buy the grave. This is the gist of it for me, because in 1948, the Palestinians, by paramilitary Israeli forces, half of the Palestinian population was expelled from the land. Period. Full stop. This is not a buyout. This is an expulsion. So how do we justify that?
and even a buyout
People
could be,
say that
Well, a buyout at least is a buyout, but this is even worse than that, because it's not a buyout, it's an expulsion.
a lot of people say they were told that after all the Arab states wiped out the Jews, they could come back to their homes. So I don't know which story is the bigger Misa.
It's probably
A combination of both,
right, but the
But to
fact,
bring it back, to the Torah text, and I think Aviva said something very important at the very beginning, and that parallels what you were saying, Sarah, that this is one way of interpreting this is how Abraham viewed his action that he could take to fulfill the promise of the land. He's already proven in the previous parshot, he's already proven his military prowess. If he wanted to take the land, he had shown that he can win on the battlefield, and he could have taken it by force. But he made the choice to say, this land needs to be purchased. I want to live in peace and live beside you, or have this beside you, and make it a fair transaction. And I think that later we're going to get all of these Torah phrases about wiping out the people who are there, and that's where the current interpretation makes it very uncomfortable for us, because the beginning seems to be, let's do it a fair way.
Yehuda?
To build on what you said, it's Abraham makes an amazing jump in his mind that he needs to be given credit for, that God has given him all this stuff, but he realizes he has to act on that gift. And that, what a jump. This is an amazing mental expansion for him, that it's not God giving it to him. It's basically God is instead giving him an image of what can be. And Abraham acts on that. That is an amazing thing. You know, therefore it doesn't surprise you for a second that the three religions of the book all grant the amazing nature of this particular man and his way of thinking about things.
He
Okay,
didn't
well,
go and poison people's wells. He didn't burn fields. He didn't destroy any of that. He didn't, that's not the way that he looked at entering the land.
Right. He's modeling this is proper behavior.
Exactly.
One thing after another in his own life, other than the throwing out of Hagar because Sarah wanted him to, which I think, but he's a human being.
And also he sold her, he threw her under the bus as his wife or his sister.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you could say that there, like he knew that Sarah would be okay. And this goes back to 127, that in all the different stages of her life, she was had this like perfect, she was perfect, sinless and beautiful. She was as beautiful as 100 as 20, or at 20 as she was at 7. I mean, it depends on the interpretation, but basically, that he knew that she would be all right, that God would protect her. I don't know which story is true or which story is not, but I don't know. Anyway, they're both portrayed as being completely sinless people.
Well, that's when we say after someone passes, may their memory be a blessing, we're almost committing to
Remembering the blessings.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to call on Ruth Ellen, but then I'm going to suggest we move on because the next chapter is one of the longest. We're going to actually subdivide it. So go ahead, Ruth Ellen.
Yeah, I just can't let it go by because I feel like there's always this either or thing. This is both. There were times when there was going to be war, and there were times when it wasn't necessary. And the main thing that made Abraham the kind of man that Yehuda talked about, his big choice was saying Hineni to Hashem in the first place and starting on the journey, which was scary. But now that he's on it, whether it says it directly or not, he's walking with Hashem, right? I mean, there's a communication. And he is divinely guided, as Arnie mentioned too. So he knew what was called for at the time. So there again, it is the relationship between Abraham and Hashem that leads to the action. You can't have, one without the other, but there's not always one right answer. In this case, I would say it was a matter of expediency because that's when Sarah died, and that's where they were when she died. So I just have to say that it can be both things.
So it's still a big chunk, 1 through 28. Whoever
I'll
wants
read
to
if you
take it
want.
on. Sure, go ahead.
Okay. And Abraham was old, advanced in years, and Hashem had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, elder of his household, who ruled over all things that were his, put your hand, pray, under my thigh, that I may make you swear by the Lord God, the heavens and God of the earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughter of the Canaanite in whose midst I dwell. But to my land and to my birthplace you shall go, and you shall take a wife for my son, for Isaac. And the servant said to him, perhaps the woman will not want to come after me to this land. Shall I indeed bring your son back to the land you left? And Abraham said to him, watch yourself, lest you bring my son back there. The Lord God of the heavens, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birthplace, and who spoke to me, and who swore to me, saying, to your seed will I give this land. He shall send his messenger before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. And if the woman should not want to go after you, you shall be clear of this vow of mine only. I just brought something on the screen that covered it. Okay, I can't see the last slide. I don't know what happened.
Only my son you must not
my
bring
son,
back
you
there.
must not bring back there. And the servant put his hand under Abraham's thigh, and he swore to him concerning this thing. And the servant took 10 camels from his master's camels with all the bounty of his master in his hand, and he rose and went to Aram Naharaim, the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel outside the city by the well of water at eventide, the hour when the water drawing women came out. And he said, Hashem, God of my master Abraham, pray, grant me good speed this day and do kindness with your master Abraham. Here I am poised by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the town are coming out to draw water. Let it be that the young woman to whom I say, pray, tip down your jug that I may drink. If she say, drink, and your camels too, I shall water. She it is whom you have marked for your servant, for Isaac. And by this I shall know that you have done kindness with my master. He had barely finished speaking when, look, Rebekah was coming out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, and with her jug on her shoulder. And the young woman was very comely to look at, a virgin, no man had known her. And she came down to the spring and filled her jug and came back up. And the servant ran toward her and said, pray, let me sip a bit of water from your jug. And she said, drink, my lord. And she hurried and lowered her jug onto her hand and let him drink. And she let him drink his fill and said, for your camels too, I shall draw water until they drink their fill. And she hurried and emptied her jug into the trough, and she ran again to the well to draw water and drew water for all his camels. And the man was staring at her, keeping silent, to know whether the Lord had granted success to his journey. And it happened, when the camels had drunk their fill, that the man took a gold nose ring and bequa, half a shekel in weight, and 2 bracelets for her arms, 10 gold shekels in weight. And he said, whose daughter are you? Tell me, pray, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? And she said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. And she said to him, we have abundance of bran and feed, as well as room to spend the night. And the man did obeisance and bowed to the Lord. And he said, blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who has not left off his steadfast kindness toward my master. Me on this journey, the Lord led to the house of my master's kinsman. And the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Hilda.
I looked up a little bit of number here. To water a camel would take 30 to 50 gallons. A gallon of water weighs 8 pounds.
Oh my God.
We're looking at a lot of work that takes time, considering, the containers that were being used to draw the water themselves weighed a lot, because otherwise they wouldn't have successfully been able to be lowered into a well. I personally have had to use a well before, and it takes a long time to get water out of a well. This is a huge amount of work. No telling how long it actually took Rebecca to do this. Of course,
In
the
the hot
camel
sun.
supposedly drink 50 gallons of water in 3 minutes.
Wow.
Unreal.
It was a miracle.
However, this is one of the clues that this was written well past the time that it actually happened, because camels were not domesticated in the region at the time that these events are supposed to have taken place. It was several centuries later before camels were domesticated. So he probably would have been traveling by donkey or some other beast of burden, but not camels. And so the fact that camels are mentioned specifically as the animal is a real clue to the fact this portion, at least, not having been written until many centuries later.
That's right. I was going to say the same thing, Alan. I always get confused when I come to this because I think we've discussed before when they were in Sinai with Moses. I think we had a discussion that there were no camels even at that time in the area. So, although they always have camels in Egypt, so I'm really confused about this.
Well, I think part of that, the art gives me a clue to that. All of these artists, or many artists, because there was such an interest in Egyptology in the Victorian era, and they visited, and what did they find? They found Bedouins with herds of camels. And they were using them for their beasts of burden, for their working the fields and carrying
so where
things.
Where were the camels?
But that was the 1800s. That was 2,000 years or more after these events. And so they were applying that to the art. And so that's what we saw.
So where were the camels? Were they in the Sahara? I have to research this. I got to research this a little more.
Yeah.
Because it's a conundrum for me. I don't understand. Like, where were the camels if they weren't there?
Again, the stories, I'm going to call on Craig and then Arnie, but I just want to say this strengthens what Yehuda's just saying by using the camel in the story and knowing how different a camel is from a different animal, because what it is about camels, they can drink once every couple of weeks and still stay alive. So they can take in huge amounts of water in a short period of time. That strengthens that argument that says that's how much of a mensch she was. And I hate to use that term because it's sort of counterintuitive, but that she perceived the needs ahead of when she was asked, because that's the quality we're supposed to remember about her, that Eliezer was looking for certain qualities. So let me call him Craig. We'll come back to this, and then Arnie after that.
Yes. I found it interesting, having seen a lot of people testify under oath. Just like last week, we had God swearing to God, putting the swear on his own name. Now we have this unique, at least to me, I never read this before, putting a hand under Abraham's thigh to make a pledge. What's that all about?
Yeah, right.
Looked it up, and apropos maybe of the tourists that Donald Trump is facing with Epstein and Bill Clinton. Some people say that it's touching near the Brit Milah spot, so that it indicates how serious it is. There are other interpretations, but wow, the various ways you swear. I've never heard of anybody putting a hand under a thigh to make a commitment. Fascinating to me.
What a difference that would make if that's how we swore the president in.
On national television.
So here it says that camels evolved in North America millions of years ago. They were domesticated in Central Asia around 6 to 6,500 years ago.
The ones in America were llamas.
Correct.
South America.
The Bactrian camel was likely domesticated in China 6,000 to 6,500 years ago. Dromedaries were later domesticated. Evidence suggesting this may have occurred in the Arabian Peninsula between 2,000 and 4,000 years ago.
Well, that's real.
Arnie.
I had the same thoughts as Craig, so I put my hand down.
Oh.
That was the exact same thing I was thinking.
Under your own thigh.
The the note in the altar translation says holding the genitals or placing a hand next to the genitals during the act of solemn oath taking is attested in several ancient societies, a fact already noted by Abraham ibn Ezra in the 12th century, though here it may have the special purpose of invoking the place of procreation as the servant is to seek a bride for the only son, Isaac.
Right,
So
and
we're leaving.
that's the explanation I've heard, because let's not forget that there's a thread of mission going on here. And Abraham cannot move on. We read at the beginning of this here that it reached a ripe old age, and we think good things have happened to him. He's attained all of what he's meant to attain, but clearly this one is missing. And so that's the indication, is that the one that I've understood is it has to do with continuity and procreation.
I just want to quickly say I'm really impressed with the nose ring.
So we started with the line, Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and Adonai had blessed Abraham in every way. Really? That feels surprising to read that. He just buried his wife. The continuity, he was assured, is hanging in the balance. His son won't talk to him, according to some of our interpretations. Feels kind of lonely. All he's got is his old servant, who's probably older than him, if we understand where he was first introduced.
Life happens. And when you look back on life, I mean, we all have things in life that happen to us that, some things are crushing and some things are wonderful. But when you look, I think, when you look back at Abraham's whole life, without looking at the specifics of it, that's when you can say that God really blessed him in his life. It's not the things that specific little things that not little, but things that happened. It's the overall picture. Because I feel in my life, I've had a lot of ups and downs, but overall, I think I've really been blessed, when I look at it. So that's all I'm saying.
Go ahead, Craig, and then I'll call on Marilyn after that.
Just speaking of the overall picture, as we consider the patriarchs and the matriarchs, it seems the most of the matriarchs are exceptionally beautiful and described that way. And Abraham, I don't know what he looked like, or Isaac, maybe we have little hints, but it just seems to me that there's some objectification of the women. And if we're going to talk about how Abraham had a fortunate life, he apparently married the most beautiful woman in the area. So I don't know. I didn't realize our matriarchs were so beautiful until I got into this Torah study.
Yeah.
You're in dangerous territory, sir.
Not me, God. I didn't write the Torah.
Okay,
And
but you're
Rachel was
commenting.
and Rachel was fair of form and beautiful to look upon. It goes on, yeah. So, except for Leah. Poor Leah. Her
Poor
eyes
Leah.
were weak.
Yeah.
Marilyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I was going to say, except that my daughter, who loves the name Leah, she wouldn't name a daughter Leah because her name is Rachel. And Rachel gets all the accolades for being so beautiful that she didn't feel like she could name a daughter Leah. So she didn't. So I'm saying there's an effect of this. It's not like there is none. But anyway, what was I going to say? I actually had a comment that completely flew away. So I guess we'll come back later if I remember.
I do want to point out, though, that as few times as women are mentioned in the Torah, that she's introduced in line 15. It says, and here's Rebecca coming out, right? and she is the daughter of Betuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor. Right, so we have the lineage. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right there. And it does say it. Rebecca was coming out. It's in line 15 there at the bottom. Was born to Betuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother. So, and that's very unusual. There's something there.
Nice.
Again, it's the genealogy. So it's differentiating, because what we're gonna, I'm gonna open whatever Matan, whoever put that in the chat to look at later, but the point being that in the idea of the continuation and genealogy, where was Eliezer instructed to go to look for the wife?
His kinsman.
The land of his birth.
To the land of his birth, exactly. And that idea of the continuity that comes with certain qualities, right? You know, it's considered to be like the first place where it says, you know, don't marry outside of the faith, and that whole line. But that's what he's saying is, I did not leave the land of my birth because there was something wrong with it or because I wanted to leave my kin. I did it because I heard the voice of God telling me to, right? So he comes from a stock of people who maybe have it in their collective culture to understand the greater calling.
So he went back to Iraq?
He went back to, Aram Naharaim is
in the Mesopotamia.
Right, but the mirror, I'll find the exact word, but the exact wording is a reference exactly to where Abraham came from.
Where his father was, where he grew up. That's
so to the land of his father.
His kinsman, right? Isn't that what it says somewhere?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
So they weren't Jewish, were they? No.
Nobody was yet.
Nobody was yet. Yeah, right.
There is no, the closest term that has survived to this day, Ivrim, are nothing more than people from the other side, and that from the Evel, from the other side, and that refers more to the time of famine where they came from the other side to seek a place where they could survive.
Yeah.
But what and let me just read what Abraham says to supposedly Eliezer, okay? Swear by, 1 minute. Put your hand under my thigh so that I may have, okay, thank you. It's line 3 I'm looking at, actually. There you go. That I may make you swear by the Lord God of the heavens and God of the earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose midst I dwell. But to my land and to my birthplace you shall go, and you shall take a wife for my son, for Isaac. Okay. Mirroring the leave your land and your ancestors. And now he says, go back to my land and my ancestors. In the Hebrew, it's clearer in the Hebrew because it's a mirroring of a concept.
What does it say?
It says, Ki el artzi ve'el moladeti, to my country and my birthplace you shall go. And God
For
says,
one night stand in your area, try the best dating app in USA. Fuck like never before.
Hold
on. I can't hear 3 people at once.
I know, I muted somebody. It's okay. Because when in Lech Lecha, God says, get up and leave your land and the land of your fathers. And now Abraham says, go to my land and the land of my fathers. So, okay, anyhow, Marilyn and then Alan.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that several years ago, National Geographic had, a spread on genetics and different peoples. And apparently Jews considering the amount of moving around, like it's not like there's China and everybody here is from there. Considering the amount of moving, we have apparently some of the most consistent DNA on the planet, if not the most, for the kinds of activities that we've had, not having, I mean, Israel's just since 48, and not that we didn't live there before, but it wasn't assigned to us, and not everybody was born there. But that the DNA is something that genealogists or scientists that deal with that take note of, because it's so much more consistent than the average DNA of a people who has been transient. Jews stick together.
Mitochondrial DNA tracing for people who are considered Cohens are 8% correct.
What percent?
And 50% correct for women.
And how much for men?
80%.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So if someone calls themselves a Cohen, the chances are very high they trace back.
Yeah, that's what it was saying.
So I just want to point out that the whole thing of genealogy is very troubling in ways that could have been predicted in advance of it becoming a commercial entity. Because the reason there's so much good information about certain people is because they have the means to do this kind of testing. So it doesn't really reflect as much on us as it does on maybe things like poverty in other places in the world or in other societies. The whole thing of genealogy has to be put where it is. It's a commercial venture that the more certain people pay money to use that service, the more information is gotten. And it is not for people who can't splurge on that. So I have Alan, and then Ruth Ellen, and then Arnie.
Well, I do something. Here I am, the skunk at the garden party again, but I do see something that is troubling to me, and that is it seems like at the very beginning, the family is doing the sorts of things that we criticize monarchies, royalty from doing, intermarriage. Sarah was Abraham's half sister. He is now going to make a shidduch for his son with his niece or his great niece. So we're talking about one or two steps removed, fairly close. And what does that do if we look at it from a modern standpoint of what we understand about genetics? What does intermarrying within a family that close potentially lead to?
Well, genetic problems sometimes.
Yeah.
Tay-Sachs disease.
But they did that in those days. They did that. It was quite common to marry your cousin or something like that. It wasn't really that unusual.
Even a few generations ago, that was happening.
Exactly. To keep land and keep wealth within the family and so on.
But as I say, is that necessarily a good thing from a standpoint of how we understand how genetics works these days?
No, so that's why nowadays some people, before they get married, they have, especially Jews and other groups who are more vulnerable to that, have testing before they get married.
Well, actually, Aviva and I had it, but it was before she gave birth.
Right.
Yeah. So, and again, that we know more now, and we try to apply some of what we know scientifically retroactively. And I don't think that it's necessarily, I don't know the value of it, because a tradition and in a place and time that was not necessarily unique only to the Israelites is, sometimes it was unavoidable. Sometimes the distances to travel to create new families and procreate was not realistic. Not everybody had camels or whatever the equivalent to traverse a desert and find, mates for their offspring. So some realities of the history of the time clash with this, but it's a fair thing. And, that's been used as an explanation to why there's so many genetic diseases among Jews.
Yeah, what did they know from
Ashkenazi Jews, I will point out, which are not,
But what did they didn't know from genetics back then anyway.
Right.
Yes and no. Do you remember how Jacob was breeding?
Yeah. They might have had
clue about some of this.
They might have had a thought about it.
Right, but we do
not
have,
scientific evidence of it. Yeah.
we have lots of laws
right.
about incest yet, right? So that there's,
We do, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so they might have had some idea of it even back then, but nothing scientific, of course.
All right, and let's go back a couple of parshot to Noah and his two daughters who were determined to keep the line going, but they're making a choice that is going to weaken the line.
Lot, you're talking about Lot.
Lot,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lot's daughters.
Yeah.
So I don't know if any of you have done 23andMe.
I've
but
done it all.
so I've done it, and I found out I was 100% Ashkenazi Jew, and that I have the Kohen male marker, the J whatever 228. I forgot the name of it. And so it was puzzling because traditionally my father, my grandfather, and I were all Israelites when it came to coming to the Torah, right? So how
Nice.
can I be, a Kohen? And so I dug a little in the family history, and I found out the great grandfather's older brother died, and he didn't marry the widow or some story like that.
Right.
I can't be 100% sure, but he was demoted. Okay. So even though I have the genetics going all the way back to Aaron, I'm not a Kohen. And the other thing I found out was the Bedouins have the exact same genetic markers as the Jews with those genetic markers. So, we are truly brothers.
Cousins.
Interesting.
I think the term is cousins, but again, the idea of brothers and cousins in biblical language, it's not necessarily that distinct. Brother could mean something much broader than just immediate sibling with same biological parents. Okay, Ruth Ellen.
Yeah, this whole genealogical thing, and I was also sort of getting to what Alan was talking about, because partly it's, when you're at the beginning of something, Genesis, you don't have a choice. It's geometric progressions. They didn't talk about that back then, right? But, they didn't have any choice. So even Lot's daughters, they saw the writing on the wall and they took the chance of the odds. Now, if you want to put that in the context of later, like a Darwinian evolution, every a broken clock is right twice a day. Hundreds and thousands of iterations over all this time. Some of them are going to get through without a problem. And now that we have a bigger population, we don't do that. But the Jews still agreed to allow first cousins to marry. And my sister would say, oh, she found out she's her husband's fifth cousin. Well, now since DNA, we're talking about Arnie Rabin being related to Rabins every other place. Say they found that all Ashkenazi Jews at the most are like, I think, 11th cousins. And why did that happen? And the Tay-Sachs and all that is because even though we traveled around to Marilyn's point, we were always excluded and kept separate. And to Yehuda's point, they were always second-class citizens. So again, we're in the shtetl, we have to do it. But what bothers me in this case more so is the idea of ethnic purity, which has become, is such a thing throughout history in different groups, and why at that point in time already Abraham would rather, the devil is better than the devil you don't know. He still wanted his progeny to come out of his source. Now, maybe he had divine inspiration for that as well, but that's always been troubling to me, because this is when we get into, if we're all cousins and we all go back to the same groups anyway, we still make these distinctions and we create a hierarchy and we put our people in our own family, and I think of it the concentric circles, on a higher level of protection or whatever you want to call it. This is a human thing, and maybe this was the way the ancients tried to deal with these puzzling questions of who is entitled to have priority in being protected. And
I don't look at it that way. I look at it as a beautiful thing, like this remnant, and I think I've said that here before, it amazes me that there is a remnant of people. Like if I look at you guys and I think to myself, I'm looking at people that come from an ancient history. And to me, that's a really amazing, beautiful thing. I don't know why that would bother anybody unless I don't know why it would bother anybody. Because to me, I don't
The
know.
ethical questions of living in a larger context. If Hashem said he chose the Israelites among the nations, choosing them to be an example, but there were still other nations. It was never.
Even though the priesthood seems to be, exclusive, okay, and they are exclusive. I also see this sort of historical miraculousness of the existence of these people from the time of Abraham and Moses. To me, it's very hopeful for the future. I don't agree with the exclusiveness, but for them, I think the exclusiveness is of importance. I think it does have an historical place. Maybe we can't see it because we're not there yet, but I think maybe we'll see it in the future.
The context we've been getting to when we try to bring it into the modern, into how it applies to us now, is human beings on Earth getting along with each other. I think that's what we're getting at. And if we ultimately, looking at Genesis, like we talk about this again, the role of the stranger versus not the stranger. And even right here again, Abraham talks of himself as a stranger in the land. And yet we're all the children of God. We all go back. And that's what I said, reading this genealogy that used to drive me crazy. When you see all these connections, if you go back enough, and I always came to my mind, that David descended from Ruth, who presumably came from the outside and was a stranger and became, like you, Sarah, you're a modern day Ruth in a lot of ways, but who went back. But then reading again, I just read some about where the Moabites came from. So the Moabites still came from Shem. I mean, if you go back far enough, you're coming from the same tribe. And if you go back far enough, we're all the same tribe.
Right.
And that's something I think maybe as human beings, in terms of trying to live halachically, live justice held out, pursue, taking care of the stranger, taking care of the widow, we all are going to have to worry about our own self-interest as well. That's survival. That's where survival of the fittest, genetics and all that come in. If there's too much inbreeding, you're going to have problems, right? So you have to take care of yourself. That brings me back to Hillel. If I don't, who will? But if only me, what's going to happen? It all ties together and back to the way to live a fruitful, meaningful life is to not take more than you need, love your neighbor, and pursue justice, and it doesn't matter what your last name is.
Right.
I just go ahead.
We are in the building block stage still of our written story. These are everything you're reading here are building blocks. Each one in and of itself is not enough to paint that picture. We are building that picture. I do want to hear what Arnie has to say. He's had his hand up for a while. And then after that, I kind of want to continue on a little bit.
Yeah, I just wanted to fast forward in our genetic story. Just wondering how many of you had generations, grandparents or great-grandparents that came from Europe, Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, Germany, Poland, and places like that. Show of hands? Most of you. Okay. So I was wondering, how long my family lived in Belarus and Ukraine, right? But 23andMe actually gave me the answer. They're able to tell by what we ate and the genetic markers that leave. And I found out my genetic story was my genes left Eretz Yisrael in about 30 AD, just right around the Roman conquest.
Yeah.
Went to migrated up to Belarus, went to Italy rather, and lived in Italy till around 1500. That was a long time in Italy, probably as slaves or merchants after the conquest of Jerusalem. And then what happens? We have the Inquisition in 1492 in Spain, but his cousin is the Archduke of Verona or something, controls most of Italy, and he does the same thing and kicks all the Jews out of Italy. And where do they go? They go north to all these other European countries. So, like, they've only been there really, 400 years in, in Europe, but they were 1500 years in Italy, which tells me why I love pizza so much.
Right.
Okay, on that note, I would like to continue reading because we wanted to know the qualities about Rebecca, why she stood out. And now let's read a little more in her own words what's going on here in part of the story. So someone read, and now we're going to read, I forgot where I put my marker here. Whatever, I'll stop us at the right time. Oh, 29 through 40. I'm sorry. Okay, through line 40.
I'll read.
Okay.
And Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and Laban ran out to the man by the spring. And it happened when he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, and when he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, saying, "Thus the man spoke to me," he came up to the man, and look, he was standing over the camels by the spring. And he said, "Come in, blessed of the Lord. Why should you stand outside when I have readied the house and a place for the camels?" And the man came into the house and unharnessed the camels, and he gave bran and feed to the camels, and water to bathe his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. And food was set before him, but he said, "I will not eat until I have spoken my word." And he said, "Speak." And he said, "I am Abraham's servant, and the Lord had blessed my master abundantly, and he has grown great. He has given me sheep and cattle and silver and gold and male and female slaves and camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master after she had grown old, and he has given him all that he has. And my master made me swear, saying, you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanite in whose land I dwell, but to my father's house you shall go, and to my clan, and you shall take a wife for my son." And I said to my master, "Perhaps the woman will not come after me." And he said to me, "The Lord, in whose presence I have walked, shall send his messenger with you, and he shall grant success to your journey, and you shall take a wife for my son from my clan and my father's house."
Actually, I'm wrong till line 49. I'm sorry.
Okay. "Then you shall be clear of my oath, and you can come to my clan, and they refuse you. You shall be clear of my oath. And today I came to the spring, and I said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, if you are going to grant success to the journey on which I have come here, I am poised by the spring of water, and let it be that the young woman who comes out to draw water to whom I say, let me drink a bit of water from your jug, and she says to me, drink, and for your camels too, I shall draw water. She is the wife that the Lord has marked for my master's son." I had barely finished speaking in my heart, and look, Rebecca was coming out, her jug on her shoulder, on her shoulder, and she went down to the spring and drew water. And I said to her, "Pray, let me drink." And she hurried in and tipped down the jug that she carried and said, "Drink, and your camels too, I shall water." And the camels too she watered. And I asked her, saying, "Whose daughter are you?" And she said, "The daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore him." And I put the ring in her nose and the bracelets on her arm. And I did obeisance and bowed to the Lord, and blessed the Lord, God of my master Abraham, who guided me on the right way to take the daughter of my master's brother for his son. And so, if you are going to act with the steadfast kindness toward my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, that I may turn elsewhere.
Okay. And by the way, the elsewhere in Hebrew is, I'll go to the right or to the left. That's for you, Alan. So what, oh, go ahead, Yehuda.
I read something this morning that in line 2412, when the servant prays, it's the first time that there's actually a human being is requesting of God something. And it's an unnamed human being, no less. So there's a modeling of praying to God for things. And it's because it's an anonymous person, it makes it that much more powerful in its own way.
Okay, so the women's commentary is a little weak because it really comments only on the women-related parts. But for that line, it says, the turn of events is even better than the servant has reason to expect. The developments appear to be the result of chance, but actually the reader has enough signs to understand that they are directed by God. And that's in reference to line 12 that you were just mentioning. So again, so there's a simplicity, there's a quality that Eliezer sees. He says, this is what I'm going to look for. And then before he even has a chance to open his mouth, those qualities unfold in front of him. Not only is this beautiful young woman offering him, and he, by the way, she pours the water into her hand for him to drink, and then she rushes to fill.
Yeah, this rushing, a number
of
times she rushes quickly.
Right.
The Meirut, right.
Yeah. And there's if we look at the stories of our ancestors and who became the patriarchs and matriarchs, those qualities are the quality associated with Rebecca is chesed. She's that word chesed, the image of her with a water jug, is that loving kindness, of being able to anticipate needs before they are spelled out. We saw that with Abraham, where he just pleads with the three strangers, come, let me give you something simple to refresh you. But then he rushes back and he's like, bring the finest flour, and he sends the kid up, bring the finest of the, right? So there's something, there's a thread there that is, you know, I don't know what to make of it, but the similarities in the language, I can't skip over them. They're too similar.
Well, they're kinsmen.
And maybe in human survival, we think of the qualities in genetics, Darwinism, that we think of physical qualities.
Right.
But maybe it is the non-physical qualities that allow the survival of the human species. So maybe acts of kindness are as important as whatever.
But maybe the acts of kindness comes out from the recognition of genes. I mean, genes are very powerful things.
I think it's used as a way of showing the generosity of heart. And, you know, because if you're taking care of someone, it's very different if you're just immediately saying, please, please come in, let me wash your feet. Please take this water from me. And it's the read that Rebecca has of this man who's come in off the desert. And, you know, I think it's showing that she has got tremendous feelings of empathy. And it's a wonderful thing, actually. It shows she's the right girl. I agree.
But as we find out so often in Breshit, it doesn't always run in the family. I mean, look at Laban. The first time we meet him, what's the thing he notices? Those shiny gold bracelets and that nose ring. And that intrigues him right away. And you can almost see, I don't know what the biblical equivalent of dollar signs would be, but you can almost see his brain saying, we got a rich one here. Let's see what we can do with it. And it just seems like, and as we'll learn later, he's not to be trusted.
Right. Say, well, you know, in their head, they're saying, well, look how much this this wealthy merchant brought us. Why don't you stay here another year?
Another 7 years. Right?
It's wonderful, actually. It's that whole thing that transpires is wonderful because they ask Rebecca's consent to move forward, and she says, "Yeah, I'm ready.
I want to get out of
I'm going
town.
to get away from Laban."
Yeah, get away from my brother, right?
Actually, the subject of siblings is a really fascinating way to read some of these stories, because right out the most, to me, the most consequential part of the story of the first siblings in our story is Hashomer Achi Enochi, am I my brother's keeper? To which, anyway you ask me, I will say there's a resounding yes. But the rest of the siblings in our stories are no less troubling. And you would think in the ideal world, siblings have some connection that transcends anything else, and they're always somehow connected and will always look out for each other, especially after that troubling story. But guess what? Nope. Because to know who Lavan was already this early, like if we were reading this innocently for the first time, we'd say, oh, Lavan, wow, what an interesting name. I wonder what it means. Well, it's not till you read it over a few times that, yeah, now it's easy to say, yeah, get me out of here. There must be better people around. If this is all there is, this is not where I want to stay and become a spinster, right? So there's a simplicity of reading it that way. But again, it's what are the qualities? Because as Arnie, where's Arnie? Did he drop off? Oh, no, it's right there. Okay. So as Arnie pointed out, when you look at the genealogy and you look at what you know that has remained, I don't know how significant it is. Because guess what, Arnie? If your brother did the very same genetic tests that you did, the answers should be on a genetic level exceedingly, frighteningly similar. Yet any of us who've had more than one child, what's the one thing we can say for sure about having more than one child? Oh my God, how different can two people be who come from the same genetic material? Right?
Depends on how the genes drop.
In terms of their looks, in terms of their personalities, like there's so much in that. But the idea of, am I my brother's keeper? That's never, once a story is written in our Torah, it never leaves again. It becomes relevant to every story that succeeds that.
And that's why I was always called the momser of the family, because I had red hair.
Yeah. And you should explain to those who might not know, but mamzer would be the same term as illegitimate or coming from somewhere else, like your genetic material is not known. That's what it means.
Except I compared my brothers, who's got brown eyes and black hair and looks like a Bedouin, to mine, and we're like incredibly close genetically. So looks don't seem to matter that much compared to other things.
You get 23 from each parent. That's the way it is.
Ruth Ellen, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm thinking this time for one of the first times about how ambiguous things are that we took as written. And again, sometimes it goes back to those stories I learned in Sunday school the first time about breaking the idols and everything. So Abraham was told to go to this land that I will show you. The implication being that his siblings, everything left behind, were satisfied and weren't seeking and weren't. And yet here we see when Eliezer retells the story, he says, well, how can we say anything otherwise? Because I don't know, I has told you to do this. So obviously there's more going on in this whole familial thing. So maybe it's to answer my earlier question about, familiarity can breed cooperation, not just contempt, right? And so maybe the legacy of being this selected group by Hashem does have, some of it rubs, it's a little bit of nepotism. I don't know the right word, but it rubs off. And so they weren't like, total idol worshipers, obviously, or they at least recognize this. that Abraham was onto something. I don't know how else to put it. And that gets lost when we oversimplify this story. So
when Abraham left the first time, when somebody leaves like that, okay, well, I gotta get out of here. Let's go to California, and you yell after them, right? If you find work, and and then everybody will follow you, and that's what happened to Abraham. He was successful. So
Yeah, we've got a lot of words that basically describe his success as being material success. His personal life, yeah, a little troubling. But he gets to redeem himself we're going to get to that. We're not going to go 3 hours today. I promise. I won't last 3 hours. Go ahead, Alan.
One of the things that because of the fact that we've done this so many times now, the repetition becomes an important element. And I think this is the first time that an event was repeated almost word for word right next to itself.
Yep.
That we had the original event and then his retelling of it to Laban. Again, almost word for word. And I know you've pointed out that that's usually meant to emphasize the importance of something. Sometimes it looks to me like, from an editor's standpoint, this is just filler. We already know that part of the story. Why do you have to tell us again? So why do you have to tell us again?
Yeah, it's one of those things that people wiser than me have studied to a lot more depth. But
and also in answer, I mean, Alan, not everybody's a trained editor. How we may read it is different than somebody who's been doing something entirely different. We're hunting for things that are discrepant or, don't make sense, that need to be filtered. Not everybody's looking like that.
Fair enough.
However, there is one line that is not repeated. Line 24, 6.
24:6 says, Abraham then answered him, no.
Because he asked him, what happens if she doesn't meet the
what's the matter? What are you looking for?
qualifications?
Are you looking at 24:6 or 25:6?
24:6.
Okay.
24:5 leads to 24:6.
Okay. Servant said to him, perhaps a woman will not want to come after me to this land. Shall I indeed bring your son back to the land you left? And Abraham said to him, watch yourself, lest you bring my son back there. Okay.
That line is not repeated.
Oh.
Pretty important.
Okay, what's the importance in your eyes?
I don't know.
Well, okay, so here comes an esoteric concept that is read into this parasha as well. And it has to do when we read farther into it. There seems to be a theory about Jewish survival, despite all the various ways they tried to kill us or whatever, that the key to it is in the looking forward and not dwelling in the past. There's a lot written about this. And, it explains how, the world continued for Jews even after the Holocaust, how they survived exile and returned to the land and exile again, that you first attend to what your needs are right now and from here on forward. And you don't look past, you don't go back to a place that once was, because you will remember it in a way that isn't necessarily real. And that if you go back, what's to say that the same history that befell your people isn't going to happen again? So that concept.
He does the exact same thing as well in 24:8. Exact same line. Don't bring them back. Don't go back.
And he says, and if you don't,
emphasizing it, whenever something's repeated, it's emphasizing it.
But if the woman, I'm reading line 8, but if the woman does not care to follow you, you are released from this oath of mine. Only do not bring my son back there.
Right.
Again.
Same exact line.
Right. There's a lot to be said for that. And we have no indication that Abraham left his homeland for any other reason other than God told him to. The whole thing about there being famine, that came later. He was not told, get up from this land because there's no future here. It was a blind trust. Get up, leave everything you know, all the comfort, and go to a place that later, I'll tell you, with the only promise that I will make a great nation of you. Well, shoot. At the time of his death, he only has, as far as he knows, 2 children, one of which he doesn't even really acknowledge. So how's that for a promise? But going backwards is never an option. That's, I think, the most important thing to me, especially about it being repeated twice. There's a danger in the idea of going back, and that has been well exemplified by the fact that we here as Jews are sitting here in paradise. You know,
He also promised Ishmael a nation, though.
Yes, but the way the phrasing, of you too, I'll make a great nation. There's no great descriptions of as the dust on the earth and the sands in the sea and the stars in the sky and the land. That's the other thing. It's the land.
Yeah, but you got to remember the whole Muslim start happened many, many, many years later, in the 6th century or something, so that's thousands of years later.
Yeah. So anyhow, thank you for pointing that out, Yuda. Yeah, because repetitions are interesting in what they add or omit. They're never verbatim. Okay, so
I just had you want to go? I just
go
had a little epiphany because one starts to wonder when it said the promise was to make Abraham a great nation. Why, or for whatever reason, do we sometimes think that divine intervention was involved in the fact that Sarah was barren for so long? And then why did Hashem say, no, you will have a nation from, so it ended up being both. It just hit me. It's another example of maturation. It's repeated in the fact that the Israelites had to be in the desert for 40 years. We talk about the things in Sarah's character that we didn't like. Perhaps the whole story evolved that way, and the delay in her becoming a mother was required for to be worthy of it, to be ready to have the next person who was then going to be the next link. Of course, back then they had a 9-month gestation period, and he had a barren wife, so he didn't have gobs of kids like Jacob did. So, it wasn't going to happen in one generation anyway. This was going to happen.
I don't understand what you said regarding the 9-month gestation period and then what followed. I'm sorry, we still have a 9-month.
I jumped it because Aviva said, well, here Abraham said God told him he was going to, about the blind faith, because he wasn't going to see the result of those generations. And he himself only had 2 children at a time when people often had, a herd of children. That's what I was referring to there, Marilyn. So that was.
The 9-month is still consistent.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
Right,
but
right,
when you
right.
have
I'm just saying, miraculously, we don't procreate. We don't turn into 1 million out of 2 in 3 or 4 generations. That's all.
Right, but when you have multiple wives, you can speed up the process.
Right, right.
But
I mean, it just hit me about the timing in a more spiritual, psychological way, or that there was a purpose to that, not just the lesson to be learned in trusting in Hashem and not laughing, that things that seem naturally unlikely to occur can still occur. But that the reason it went down that way is because everything that ensued, and that 90 years had to happen for a reason to be ready for the son that she did have. Anyway, that's just a thought.
All right, Yoda, you had your hand up?
Viv and I were talking this morning that, I was sort of making a contention that, considering the promise in effect talks about the result of being fruitful and multiplying is to yield a multitude of nations with more people than there are stars in the sky or sand on the beach or dust on the earth. And I was making the contention that, why not just consider that actually was a true thing that resulted in the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jews all representing this projection forward of this is what it's going to look like, because they are dominant entities in the greater world population.
Are we the stars or the dust?
Sarah, you have your hand up.
I just want to go back to why it's repeated, why he went through the whole thing again about what happened at the well with Laban, because this he was sent on this mission. He sees Rebecca and he goes into Laban's house and he allows Laban to take care of his camels and everything, but he doesn't eat until he seals this deal. And I think he goes over the whole event at the well to convince Laban that this was God's it was meant to be, that it was from Hashem or from a higher power, and so that deal would be sealed right then and there, and then they could go on with whatever. So I think that's why it's repeated again. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Like if he's just there for his daughter, he doesn't need to repeat it. But by repeating it, he's saying there's a higher power that is involved here, the way this came down.
I'm going to advocate for taking on the next chunk. Sarah, would you like to read? It's 50 through 67. We're going to
we never did consider that maybe the writers were paid by the word.
Okay, thank you for that.
Trying to get rid of this. Why can't I get rid of the picture here? There. And Laban and Bethuel answered in Bethuel. Who's that? Bethuel answered and said,
That's the father. That's their father.
Oh, the father. Yeah, okay. And said, from the Lord, this thing has come. We can't speak to you, neither good nor evil. Here is Rebecca before you. Take her and go out and let her be wife to your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. And it happened when Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed to the ground to the Lord. And the servant took out ornaments of silver and ornaments of gold and garments, and he gave them to Rebekah, and he gave presents to her brother and her mother. And they ate and drank. He and the men who were with him, they spent the night and rose in the morning, and he said, send me off that I may go to my master. And her brother and her mother said, let the young woman stay with us 10 days or so, then she may go. And he said to them, do not hold me back when the Lord has granted success to my journey. Send me off that I may go to my master. And they said, let us call the woman and ask for her answer. And they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. And they sent off Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, become hence myriads teeming. May your seed take hold of the gate of its foes. And Rebekah rose with her young woman, and they mounted the camels and went after the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went off. And Isaac had come from the approach to Beer Lahai Roy as he was dwelling in the Negev region. And Isaac went out to stroll in the field toward evening, and he raised his eyes and saw, and look, camels were coming. And Rebekah raised her eyes and saw Isaac, and she alighted from the camel. And she said to the servant, "Who is that man walking through the field towards us?" And the servant said, "He is my master." And she took her veil and covered her face. And the servant recounted to Isaac all of the things he had done. And Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother, and took Rebekah as wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was consoled after his mother's death. And Abraham took another wife, and her name was Keturah. And she bore him Zimran and Jokshan and Medan and Midian and Isbak and Shua. And Jokshan begot Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Ashurim and Letushim and Leumim. And the sons of Midian, Ephah and Epher and Hanak and Abidah and Eldah. All these were the sons of Keturah. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. And to the sons of Abraham's concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still alive and sent them away from Isaac, his son, eastward to the land of the east. And these are the days of the years of the life of Abraham, which he lived 175 years. And Abraham breathed his last and died at a ripe old age, old and sated with years, and he was gathered to his kinfolk. And Isaac and Ishmael and his sons buried him in the Machpelah cave in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar, and the Hittite, which faces Mamre. And the field that Abraham had bought from the Hittites, there was Abraham buried, and Sarah his wife. And it happened that after Abraham's death, that God blessed Isaac, his wife, his son, and Isaac settled near Beersheba. Oh, no, not Beersheba, near Beer Lahai Roy. And this is the lineage of Ishmael, son of Abraham, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's slave girl, bore to Abraham. And these are the names of the sons of Ishmael according to their lineage. Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kedar, and Adbeel, and Mibsam, and Mishma, and Duma, and Masa, Hadad, and Tamah, and Jetur, Naphish, and Kedma. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names in their habitations of their encampments, 12 chieftains according to their tribes. And these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. And he breathed his last breath, his last, and died, and he was gathered to his kinfolk. And they ranged from Havilah to Shur, which faces Egypt, until you come to Ashur, and despite of all his kin, he went down.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I meant to subdivide that, but I'm glad we didn't. So
Yeah, that's good that we went through.
yeah.
But that is a very puzzling last line.
Yeah. Yeah, we can get to that last slide. We can get to it now before I take us back somewhere.
I wonder why he did that. He kind of went against the grain there.
Put that last line back up. Yes, thanks.
Despite of all his kin, he went down.
Yeah. I mean, we've had the idea of going down, like they went down to Egypt because of the famine, and then later Yaakov is going to go down to Egypt to be with Joseph, and and start that process. So going down isn't necessarily a good thing.
It was meant to be.
Wasn't
Well,
it
the
geographic?
Hebrew word is nafal, and
Yeah.
nafal means fall down.
But it also means something.
Safaria just said they camped alongside all their kin instead of in despite of all his kin he went down. So if we maybe, yeah, we need a little etymology.
No, this is hard because of the Hebrew, as Yehuda points out, but it really it ends with just a place, right? This is where they settled from Chavila to Shul, which will come up in later when we talk about exiting Egypt, which is at the face of Egypt, right? Facing Egypt, coming towards Shul, and that's it. And that's where they settled.
So, Aviva, you're talking geographically, correct?
Yes, but I do want to point something out. That there is the direction of south. And the idea of going down, settling, going down, all those could be connected in that they went backwards. And I'm not sure. I mean, that's just what I'm seeing with plain eyes right now. I'm looking for a little bit of a reference in one of my multitudes of books that are sitting here. But in the Hertz translation, just says, over against all his brethren did he settle.
And here it is again with using the pronouns and who are they referring to. So I have the word despite. So when I see that despite all his kin, is it referring to his kin through Abraham, which would be Isaac and that whole crew? Or is he camped along, or is he going back towards Egypt because that presumably is where his mother is from? Why does the author use the word despite? Despite is not being used.
Well, it's not in spite of. It doesn't mean in spite of. It means despite. That is, I think, okay, this is my own take. Despite that all his kin were there, he separated himself. He was next to them, but he didn't stay with them.
Right.
So I don't think it's like in spite
from his
of
own
them.
sons? From his own sons? Who is the kid he's talking about?
The interesting thing too, Ruth Ellen, is look at the few verses before that. Ishmael comes up again, like his whole thing comes up again with Ishmael. Like he's so important in this narrative time and time again. There's this strain where he keeps coming up. So, maybe it has to do with Ishmael's genealogy, and then he had to go. He separated himself from the rest of his kin. That's for sure. In these verses.
Here's the note in the Alter translation. He says the translation reproduces the enigmatic character of the whole clause in the Hebrew. In despite of all his kin, repeats exactly the words of Ishmael's blessing in chapter 16, verse 12. And so the ambiguous he here may also be Ishmael, who is mentioned in the previous verse. But some construe the initial preposition of the clause as alongside or in the face of. The verb is equally opaque. Its most common meaning is to fall. Some have imagined it as a military meaning, to attack or raid. Others have construed it as a reference to the falling of the inheritance.
And I want to say that the key word in the Hebrew is pnei. It's the face of. So the face of is a very, it's used in so many different ways biblically. So when someone is described to bow down so low that they fall on their face, there it is, al pnei kol echam, okay? So the idea of face to face is full of so many different meanings. Facing something is facing yourself first and foremost. Facing something is sometimes a turning away because it's in spite of, or in spite, period. The idea of face is very complex. And to me, what I'm reading at the end of here is going against the grain kind of thing. Like they went somewhere and now the story is going to continue from there. Like they did something, they could have done something different, but because they did this, which is facing this way, that's where the story goes. So, in the endings, they often prepare us for what's coming next. And it's not necessarily much more meaningful than that. But the idea of going down to the direction of south is significant because it leads the story to where it's going next. You want to say anything? I have a different thing I want to change direction. So
reference that, what I said before about the Torah, the promise being, as multitudes of nations and that there'll be many people. And I think that this sort of proves it because of the laying out of the genealogies of Keturah, the laying and all the family that came from him, and the laying out of the genealogies of Ishmael too. This sort of lays out that same thing, that the promise is fulfilled beyond the Jews.
Arnie?
So are we to assume that Abraham's second wife came from the old country too?
So
I think she was Hagar.
Right, let's go there. So first of all, here are
Third
two.
wife, then.
No, well,
the later one.
So
they
there's
think
there's a
Go.
lot in this story. I'm gonna defer because I'm changing the subject when I speak. So Sarah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say a lot of the commentary says that she, Labata, what's her name?
Keturah.
Keturah is Hagar.
Oh,
Right.
That Hagar went back into his tent after all of that.
And
That's
the
what it
references to when Rebecca first sees Yitzchak walking, he's walking from the place that when Hagar was first ran away, she ended up at a place that she named a well, and God saw her. That's the same place that Yitzchak was when he saw Rebecca coming toward him.
The same well.
And the second time when she's thrown out, her eyes open up and she sees a well. So there's sort of a backstory that, even if Sarah had a hard time, with Hagar or Keturah or whatever, and Ishmael, the reality might be that behind the scenes, these guys are still acting as family, but not including Sarah in it anymore.
and the second thing I was going to mention is, when you say go down and you assume it means south, that means they've accepted the same style of map making that we use, which, is so relative. Who knows? I mean, what kind of mapping and how they saw the relationship of the earth, and I know it says go down to Egypt, in that one parsha, but it just, makes me think, well, maybe they were able to make maps and depict their common area that they knew about, what little of the earth they knew about, in that same, context as we use it.
Okay, so yes, map making is a thing. It always has been. You could always tell where the sun rises and where it sets. And you can tell the changing seasons of the year by the arc of the sun being more tilted in one direction or another. So map making is a thing. We just gave it a name at some point and refined it. But the idea of knowing where you are in the day and knowing where you are in the world was already a thing. We have it in Torah speak. We have it many times. And so I just want to, let me just clarify one thing, Yehuda, before you speak. The reference to east is kedem, the before. And the reference to south is Teimana, and also down, Vayirdu, as you pointed out. It doesn't necessarily confer a value of good or bad, but in the story that was committed to paper a very long time ago, the instances where people went to that land, they went down in times of distress and bad things happened to them there. So it developed its own meaning. there was no like north being up and south being down necessarily, but in terms of east, west, north, and south, there's very much a place, rivers flowed in a certain direction. The sun shone in a predictable manner over the year. Seasons happened to line up. This was a science even then, very
It's
clearly.
interesting, though, the Nile flows the opposite way as the other rivers, so that
Right.
must have been a little confounding.
Yeah, well, the Nile was
Egypt has always been south, down. You go down to Egypt, wherever you go from,
Yeah.
In the biblical culture.
I was kind of thinking along Vic's line, even I've thought of this before, it's not a physical thing, it's more of an emotional, mental thing. When you go down, it's like you're going away from what you know, you're going up,
back into the
up,
hills.
associated with enlightenment, so to speak, So it kind of takes on the connotation to some degree that down is not so good maybe as up, but not necessarily. But I think it takes it out of just being a geographic location system.
actually Yuda first and then Craig. So go ahead, Yuda. Put your hand down.
I think that proves out when you use a concordance and you see how Laredet is used throughout the Torah, that this is the case, what you're all talking about. So along that line, I want to point out that this parsha, the action really doesn't start until the third line. It recalls that Sarah died and Abraham mourned, but then Abraham arose. So the very first word is vayakom. And the very last word of this parsha is nafal.
Which is the same word for what happens when Rebecca sees Isaac. She falls off her camel. Just thought I'd mention it.
Every time I see you in the morning, I literally fall out of bed.
Okay. Craig?
When you were talking about that last word and the descendants of Ishmael, I think about some of the religious zealots who do actually go so far down that they wear a permanent bruise in the middle of their forehead, like a lot of Al-Qaeda leaders, etc. And I'm always fascinated by the political dynamics of all of this and learning about the 12 tribes of Ishmael and how that is routinely taught and revered in Islam. And this number 12 is interesting and a fascinating, important number we should talk about. But while Islam does definitely believe in and subscribe in the 12 tribes of Ishmael, they don't really accept that Hagar was Keturah. And they say some Muslims who were influenced by Jews who had that interpretation, but generally Muslims reject the idea that Keturah was Hagar. So that was just interesting to me. And if we take God at his word, he's dividing it really pretty fairly among those two sons. 12 for you and 12 for you. And there we are.
All right.
What can I ask a question?
And it's also interesting that 12 months in a year, even though we have the lunar calendar in Hebrew, but it kind of works out well to have 12 months in a year, and God probably knew that too.
12 tribes.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
Right.
What wasn't there a comment though? I mean, it said, and Abraham gave everything to Isaac, and then it went on to talk about how the gifts he gave to his other children, but he gave everything to Isaac, which is quite different than, I mean, I just got the sense that in value they were not comparable.
So this is what I wanted to bring up. This is the last thing I'm going to, oh, okay, Alan brought that up. It does say Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. Okay, yes. So I just want to say that there are two very important clues here about the fact that Isaac and Ishmael did not see each other for the rest of their lives.
They buried Abraham together.
Right, but before that, there were two mentions of that one place that mentioned once before, Be'er Lachai Roi. It's a named place. It's the place where Hagar is told, open your eyes, twice. She's there. And the one time where she says, open your eyes, because there is life. Open your eyes. There's a well. You will live. Be'er, well, Lachai, from the word chai, and Roi. Look, there's water, you will live. Okay? Now, there's indication that Yitzchak was there. He came from being with his brother, and then he saw Rebecca on the plains riding her camel, and part where she fell off. And then again, so there is, and then in those days of traveling across a desert, how would you know that your father died and you need to be there for the funeral, or don't need to be there but want to be there? So there's really clear. Whether it's important enough for the narrative to mention it by name, or to be there just so that they never lost touch. They remained brothers, because the theme of brotherhood is a very important one. As we move on to the next, my goodness, we know what happens next. This brother thing is very troubling. Who gets what? Who gets what? The everythingness. Abraham gave his all that he was. So yeah.
Could have been his guilt trip.
His what? His guilt trip?
His guilt trip for,
that too.
Isaac, taking Isaac on a little tour of the mountain there. So,
but I think one thing we could interpret it, because it was already stated how wealthy Abraham had become. And so maybe everything that he had was the material wealth, and the others get something, but that is flocks and whatever, all of this is material goods would be what went to Isaac. But I want to come back to something that we've talked about before, the importance of a genealogy being listed in the Torah, and the fact that Ishmael's line goes nowhere with our belief.
Right.
And yet it's important enough to include his genealogy in here.
Yeah.
I think that's why what I was using that as evidence for the fulfilling of the promise. And the promise includes Ishmael.
Craig, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Yes, I was thinking that maybe Abraham gave him nothing, but God assured that he would create a great nation, which is probably better in the long run. But I looked up again how Islam deals with this direct statement. I don't read the Hebrew, but it seems plain that Abraham favored Isaac and gave him everything, and they just don't believe in that. And they say that that was either an alteration of the Torah or some story that got confused. And that's kind of the heart of a lot of our problems, is they say the Torah was altered by the damn Jews to, shortchange Ishmael and the prophesying of Muhammad, that sort of thing. So a lot of these passages, it's interesting how Islam embraces 12 tribes of Ishmael, but say, no, Abraham treated them equally, loved them the same. Or maybe favored Ishmael since he was the one who was taken to be sacrificed.
Depending who you're asking to tell the story. Ruth Ellen?
Right. There's a lot more of them than there are of us.
I'm kind of reminded here. I think we asked last week, has anyone read the Quran? And all of a sudden it's hitting me. I remembered that it hit me the first time we read that Esau married one of Ishmael's daughters. That's number one. So we have this whole period before Muhammad before there was a Quran, before there was any written thing we think of as Muslim that were the descendants of the descendants of Ishmael. What was going on then? There's not a lot in the narrative. Maybe if we do look, there is more in terms of all these different tribes. That's why the genealogy is important. It's possible that they lived in peace with each other, and that many of Ishmael's descendants believed in one God, which they later called Allah. I mean, the schism that we think of now as between the children of Ishmael and the children of Isaac didn't really come into the scene that affects us to this day till hundreds of years later, right? So,
if you look at what Matan wrote in the chat, by documenting this lineage, the Torah establishes the relationship between Israel and these neighboring peoples. They're related through Abraham, which explains both their similarities and their complex relationship. Genealogies are never for nothing. They're not a filler. You are right. Genealogies are extremely important. It's not the rest of the story of the covenant, but it's never not a part of the continuation.
Right.
The
What
largest,
made me think of that right now is when you actually said Isaac obviously was in contact. They were brothers. Isaac and Ishmael, we forget about if their mothers were the desperate housewives of the desert, but they were brothers and they had a relationship. All the closest we get is that they both came to bury Abraham. Again, it's filling in between the sparse words. That's fascinating and complex.
and the largest Muslim country is Indonesia, which has no, ethnic similarity to the Muslims who are to be descended from this story, right?
Well, that's how empires. I mean, then you have to look at a different view of world history, which is empires, and the
Yeah, but
Ottoman
I'm just
Empire.
saying they're not the children of Ishmael genetically, right?
That's analogous to Saul going to the Gentiles so there are all these Christians that aren't from that lineage either. Yeah, so that's when you have great multitudes, a great mess can happen, right?
True.
Well, I feel like I got zero control over the fact that we're reaching toward 3 hours. I don't know what to say.
Because time flies when you're having fun. It hasn't felt like 3 hours. And those of us who had to leave left, and most of us feel like we can't wait till next Saturday. We've talked about that.
Well, next Saturday we have a service.
Okay.
So, and we're going to be at 10:30 at New Thought and on Zoom and on YouTube and Facebook. And Aviva is leading, and we're going to have Torah readings with Vic and Sherry, Rabbi Sherry.
Barry told me he's going to do the drush.
Yes, Barry's
It's
going to do the
also a
drush
little aside.
on
It's
his birthday. Yeah,
Yeah.
We know
in
it's his
honor of his birthday. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's his birthday actually the day before, but we're going to mark it with his drush on Toldot coming up.
And then you have to leave a little early then.
And we're going to make lentils. We're going to make lentils for the potluck. So
great idea.
Tell me why. I don't get that.
Oh, the story of Jacob and Esau and selling his birthright for a pottage of lentils.
Sorry, thank you.
And then we have services again 2 weeks later, if I'm correct.
Yes, right in December.
So Sherry is reprising her adult bat mitzvah. So we're having the service on December 6th.
It's going to be the 6th. Yes,
Yeah.
December 6th.
Otherwise known as my son's birthday.
Aw.
Lots to celebrate.
Can you tell us how old he's going to be?
34.
Oh, mazel tov.
Oh, so young.
So anyhow, I'm getting up to walk because I've got to get up out of this chair. And this is great. I really look forward to Saturday mornings, I have to say. Gets me away at least from reading the news.
Yeah, really.
No, I did. I always scan the news the minute before I get online because it feels like no matter, though it's Shabbat and we do different things on Shabbat, that it doesn't feel okay not to carry people for whom life might not be as rosy as